Hello, everyone, and welcome to this late episode 120 of the Peak of Serenity podcast. I
Nice.
am the delinquent host, emallson, and joining me, as always, we have my co host, Anomoly.
Hello.
We are slightly late this week because I had family stuff.
If
Uh,
for once it wasn't me. For
yeah, for
once it
once it
wasn't me.
wasn't Anam. But it worked out for us to do the show on a Monday, so we are doing this on a Monday, which means that if you're listening to the audio one, it may have shown up in your podcast app slightly later than normal, because I'm recording when I would normally be editing.
Exactly.
Um, but today we got more alpha stuff. We got a new phase of the alpha this week. It seems like they're kind of trying to keep like a weekly cadence of updating stuff on the alpha. So we've got new dungeons, we got more crafting stuff. There's a new zone, shaman
Mhm.
talents, still no monk talents, but you
Week.
know, this is actually quite a bit for the second week of alpha. Like we got a lot of new stuff dumped on us. I actually have not gotten the chance to play it as much as I would like. I did get to go through the dungeons, and we will get to talk about those a little bit later.
Nice. Nice.
But
Yeah,
before
and then I
we,
think there was
oh
there's one or two little things I think we had, but I think you were
yeah,
going here before we jump into that. How was Reclear this week? Did you get the jailer?
no.
No?
So this is an abnormal podcast episode as well because it's actually after my full raid week. Normally we
Yes.
have half my raid week left during the podcast recording.
And you're
Um,
super optimistic at that point still.
yeah, we just had a really rough week. Like we just had a
Yeah.
really rough week. Like Halandris is not a boss that we have ever really struggled with on Reclaim. Um,
Mhm.
and we just spent like 2.5 hours on it,
Jeez.
and just like stuff like that, you know. Um, yeah, just a really rough
Yeah.
week. I will say that I'm really curious to go back to Castle Nathria now and do actually specifically Stone Legion Generals again, and then to go back to Sanctum and do Kel'Thuzad and Fate Scribe again, because I'm pretty sure actually now, having done all three tiers, that my most hated reclear boss is going to be Lords of Dread.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Uh
Interesting.
it there that fight's just not that fight's just not fun. It snowballs so hard. If one person gets hit by a green thing in minute one, like the rest of the fight just gets much harder because that makes it harder to dodge when the fears like spread the green stuff and it all gets out of control. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, we had our first reclear in what I say, what 2 weeks this week. And it also we didn't full clear. But we did get up to Raglan down. We actually left Lords up and Jailer up.
Solid
And we
choice. Raglan
yeah.
is easier. I think Raglan is actually easier than right now. If you've killed both, I think Raglan is easier because it's actually like it's not forgiving at all. Like if you mess up, you die. The whole raid dies.
Yeah.
But it's shorter and it's really clear what you're supposed to do at every point in the fight.
Right, exactly.
What
Yeah,
it
and yeah. It's definitely like you still like we wiped, I mean, for probably about 30 minutes to it when before we killed it. And yeah, it was sort of the same idea of like it was just those binary, like somebody missed the jumping in the hole
yeah.
or just intermission. We had like the wrong CD set up and like people died or fell over. But no,
Yeah.
we had similar troubles. Like we had trouble on, so we got up to night one, we got up to Halandris down, killed Halandris really late. Um, so we basically full cleared everything, but up to Anduin. Or no, I'm sorry, we had Lahuvim. And Lahuvim actually presented a little bit of a challenge for us because we basically changed our whole strat. So we went for
Yes.
like the speed kill strat.
It's such a
Uh,
such a nice strat.
it is, except like our like if unfortunately for our range DPS or just our DPS players in general, like if you don't tell them exactly what to do, if you're just like, hey, avoid this area, they will not avoid that area. They'll just be like, you said the marker, but not the whole path
Yeah.
in any event. So we had a couple wipes on Lahuvim, but no, Halandris was an issue. Anduin was an issue, and then just honestly, it was 2 or 3 wipes to every boss. Like, every boss we
Yeah,
wiped to, and
yeah,
it was just that sort of idea of, like, it wasn't we spent a bunch of time, it was just like, "Alright, we wiped, now we gotta, like, reset and restart and go through it," and,
yeah,
took a bit. Zymox was interesting because we had an entirely different, like, healing comp, and
yeah,
yeah, between Halandris and Anduin, I think we had 6 new people on each boss, like, who got,
yeah,
like, the first kill achievements as we killed it.
yeah.
So it's like,
We
whew,
didn't
it's
we
a
didn't
lot of new
have that
people.
many. We did have new people in, and in particular, actually, our Healy priest was out of town this week, so we had somebody playing, a substitute Healy priest, and
Gotcha.
there's some extra learning to do, and they did fine, but it did like there was a little bit of a learning curve. I feel like from that as we got used to it. Our
Mhm.
Anduin did not take us very much time. We wiped 3 times to it or something, and then we killed it.
Oh,
Like,
nice,
we took like
nice.
30 minutes to get through Anduin, but 2.5 hours to get through Alondris, and an hour and change to get through Pantheon of all things.
Oh, wow.
Which
Yeah,
Pantheon,
we
we had been planning to do Pantheon, like we had been planning to borrow a skip from somebody and then do Pantheon second to last, and we were going to do the speed
mhm.
strat for Pantheon. And then our person that was going to give us a skip accidentally saved himself to another instance, so we had to change plans mid raid.
Oh, no.
Um, and we that meant that this is something we're not going to do again, but we didn't have assignments prepped for regular Pantheon, just for speed Pantheon. So we actually
Gotcha.
spent like 20 minutes trying to do Pantheon with like 3 people that were assigned to interrupts not actually being in, because the speed strat for Pantheon is 1 tank, 2 healers.
Yeah.
So we had to go up to 2 tanks, 4 healers, which meant that we brought in 3 people, took 3 DPS out. They all happened to be on the interrupt assignments.
Jeez. That is rough to get, like, a late change like that. Yeah, we ended up weirdly enough, we ended up 3 healing pretty much everything up to Halandris, just because we only had, like, 3 main healers. Like, we had, like, a we
Yeah,
had our, like, our we had some shaman that could flex in if we needed them, but, like, we were just like, "Oh, we'll just try 3 healing it," and, like,
it
yeah,
worked.
Pantheon was sketchy,
Yeah,
like, at 3, but, we made it through it. It was just, like, actually, to be fair, it was sketchy because we didn't have people, like, clearing, like, the debuffs or whatever,
yeah,
in certain cases, but no, it was nice to get back into it and, like, go back through the, like, re-clearing, and the nice part is too, like, for us, like, our raid leader is pretty good about, like, setting expectations for the week, and, like, the expectation was, like, just kill Anduin, like,
yeah.
just get another skip item
So
so
like
eventually we can skip
Regulon
this,
is
like
Regulon is just extra.
yeah, like, anything after Unknown would have been extra, and, like, the jailer would have been, like, we somehow, like, played out of our minds,
Are
and
you all gonna extend next week and then just get the jailer down, or
no, we're just gonna I mean, we got the kill. Like, we don't put a lot of, like, because like, the people would want a jailer kill, the people want CE, and,
yeah,
like, for us, it's better to get the gear, like, to fill out, like, people's stuff that they need, so, yeah, we're just gonna re-clear again, and if we get jailer, awesome, if we don't,
yeah.
it is what it is.
So
So,
we didn't actually take a break after progression, which I think is part of
gotcha.
our issue this week, because we had people that really wanted the CE achievement, and season 4 coming soon, very soon. In
Mhm.
fact, next week is the last week of season 3,
Yep.
and so we went straight back into reclears, and I think that's part of this week's just kind of like overall kind of bad bad raid week.
Yeah.
Um, so we're actually extending again. Just gonna go in and kill. Oh, well, it hasn't been decided. We're extending or finding a skip. Something we're going to go and kill Lords of Dread, Regulon, and the Jailer, and we're only raiding Friday, so Sunday is off.
Oh, nice. Nice. Yeah, I think the break for us was I mean, we were like I said, we were gonna take that break anyway, but I think it was nice. And I mean the unfortunate part for me personally is it'll be the first year I don't get CE in like years,
Yeah,
right? But like at the same point, I did have like a kid. I missed like 6 weeks of rating,
yeah,
like in the middle of that.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
so
it's
yeah,
like
so it is what it is.
we got a Jailer rekill, but only one of our people that wanted CE was actually in town for that rekill.
Oh,
So now we've got the second person that's in town that wants it, and we're like, well, there's a gear reset in 2 weeks, so we don't care that much about getting more vaults.
Yeah, that's true.
So
That's true.
yeah,
But yeah, it was a rough week back, but I think it was still fun to raid again. Um, so yeah, so I guess we move into items from last week. So really, there's only two big things from last week, which we can kind of talk about. The first one is Raider.io did their season 3 recap stuff, so you can get your own fun personal facts about how you did raid and Mythic Plus and things like that. Mine is hilarious, by the way. So like the opening
is it
stat is like,
empty?
what spec? No, it's actually not. It's like, what specs have you like done Mythic Plus and raids with? And it's like I've done raids and Mythic Plus with every spec in the game but one, and that one is a Mistweaver monk. I've never never done anything with another Mistweaver monk because you only ever need one of them. But no, it's a breakdown of all like your Mythic Plus, all the dungeons you've done, specs you've done them with, like the people you've done the most dungeons with, and things like that. So um no, it's a cool little breakdown of like your stats from this tier, both Mythic Plus and raid wise. So yeah, I mean, if you're into that type of stuff, it's cool. Mine's pretty funny. Again, like I said, only haven't done anything with a Mistweaver, and only done Mythic Plus on 2 specs, which is Priest and Monk. So, um, Rare I know it does it at the end of every season, so I don't know. I always like looking back because like this season I actually had a lot more done than last season. I think last season I'd done a total of 25 or like 30 total Mythic Plus dungeons the entire season, which literally
Yeah.
equated to me getting like uh KSM and then like doing one a week for a couple weeks after that. So
Yeah, it's
um
funny if I go and I look at my recap, there's a list of people at the bottom that is like the people you ran with the most. And for me
mhm.
it's the people that I ran Legion time walking keys
Oh,
with
nice.
to get trinkets.
That's awesome.
I ended up getting both trinkets and that ran a lot of keys.
Yeah, that's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah, no, for me it was like a bunch of guildmates who we did like early season keys with. So but no, it's a cool little breakdown if you like the stats and things like that. It also shows that I still have 0 mythic kills on Lords and the Jailer. So
Yeah.
um a little bad there. And the other thing too, which funnily I put this in the notes like season 4 next week. And I was like info, and I was like, by the time we do this podcast on Sunday, like there would have been something that said, here's what season 4 is about from Blizzard. But it's now Monday afternoon and we know nothing about it. So I guess from me, the only things that I will tell you, and you can sort of, if you have a couple, these are just our points. I don't know if Blizzard will ever say this, but season 4, at least in terms of like a couple different things. The first is the vendors. So like in season 4, um there's a new vendor and there's a new currency where you can purchase items from the raids only. So this isn't items from Mythic Plus at all, but it's you can
Right.
purchase raid items. They're all weapons and trinkets. And you get to purchase 3 of them over the course of the season. So you earn this currency to purchase 3, and you'll get 3. The one thing to keep in mind is it's only trinkets and weapons of that your class can use. So like you can buy Brewmaster trinkets, you can buy Windwalker trinkets, you can buy Mistweaver trinkets. Notably for Mistweavers, this means that the sausage trinket, damage
Is
one,
not
is
an
not on
option.
the vendor.
Yeah.
It's not on the vendor. But
Oops.
everything else is. And so like to be fair, what you're probably gonna do from a healing perspective is buy the best healing trinkets because those are gonna be the worst ones to get. And sort of forego weapons because you can get weapons from anywhere. The other thing too is, and I think this was your point, which I think you clarified beforehand, is um, you can only upgrade items from the Mythic Plus dungeons that are active, which means from Shadowlands, it's only the Tazvest dungeons. Those are the only items you can upgrade with Valor.
Right.
And then any of the older or the other ones that are active. So Mechagon, um, Karazhan, and then Iron Docks and Grimrail.
So you can go into the Mythic Zero versions of the other Shadowlands dungeons, like the other side, for example. You can go in there, you can get a Mythic Zero IQD. In Season 3, that one can be upgraded up to rank 12. Um, in Season 4, it will not be able to be upgraded. So you will only be able to upgrade things that, like Anam said, come from the current season's dungeons.
Yep. Exactly, exactly. So that's like sort of one clarifying thing. They haven't put a post out on it, but that's that. And then what else was I thinking? Oh, the other thing too is I think somebody said in chat, Tazal, or Tazatal, we do know the rotation for faded raids. So basically it just follows the same rotation as the release. So first week, Nathria is faded, second week, Sanctum's faded, third week, Sepulchre's faded. And so that'll be the rotation, and it just repeats itself on a 3-week timeline. So
Yep.
that's fun. I will say, doing best in slot lists, there is literally only one non-mastery int two-hander from all of Mythic Plus um, on the loot tables out of all those dungeons, which is fun. And there's weird. If it wasn't for iron, or it wasn't for the WAD dungeons, there would be weird gear gaps. Meaning, like,
Yeah.
I think it's like, other than those two dungeons, there's no like chess pieces without mastery on them, or something weird. There's something weird like that. But there's certain armor slots where there's just nothing there.
Yeah.
Um, but that doesn't. I don't think that matters, because we were talking last night about this in Discord. Basically, all but like two slots are gear locked at this point, as you go into season 4, because you have like your trinkets. You're not going to change. There's going to be best trinkets. You're going to want to not. You're going
Yep.
to sort of target, right.
You got your
Rings. You're
tier
probably going to wear mech.
items.
You're going to have your 4 tier items. You're going to have 2 legendary slots. You're going to have Drape of Shame, because that's still really good. It
Yeah.
looks like, and still something you can get. And then also you're probably going to run the ring combos for Mechagon,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, at that point, it's like boots and like one other item that like floats, that you can sort of have multiple sources of. So
Brewmaster is actually going to be way more open than that. Like, we're going to have tier and legendaries, and your trinkets are going to be reasonably locked down. None of the trinkets from the new dungeons are really that exciting, especially Mechagon trinkets are exceptionally bad. Like, they're
yeah,
really, really bad. Um, so there's really nothing exciting going on there. Um, but we're probably not going to run the Mechagon rings unless you can get like there's one combination that can be pretty good, but they're all high haste. Like if you wear the Mechagon rings, you're taking high haste and you just live with it.
hmm,
So like maybe it ends up being worth, but you have to get one very specific combination in order to make that worth. You can't just like slap any pair of them on and be like happy with it. So um
yeah,
and then that means that we actually have a lot of like flexibility, but also we're probably like a bunch of people are going to end up spending like 2 dinar just on vein rippers.
yeah. For like the damage. Yeah,
Um, but I have not worked on a BiS list yet because I mean I haven't wanted to honestly.
it's. I forgot. I will tell you. Don't get too discouraged. Like, I forgot the WAD dungeon system was like, there was basically like 5 sets. They all had different
Yeah,
stat combinations, but it was like the different stat combinations across all 5.
yeah,
And like they dropped everywhere. So like, if a dungeon dropped leather chests, it dropped like 5 different leather chests with different
yeah,
stat comps. So it's just, yeah, that part's annoying. But no, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how Mythic Plus sort of changes it up. But that was just some fun facts I learned
yeah.
yesterday as I was going through all of the gear that can drop from those places. So
So Drez asks, Brew will use the token on the trinket from the 9 and probably the staff from the 9, correct? And I think the answer to that is actually no. So the reason for that is that there's also, as part of Season 4, an upgrade currency that you can earn that allows you to bump normal and heroic eye level items, and then probably also LFR eye level items up to mythic eye level. So the 9 is very easy to get on every difficulty. Like maybe you don't get it on mythic, but you can very easily in the space of a week kill the 9 on LFR, normal, heroic, and mythic to get 4 shots at each of those items, and then you take those and you use the upgrade currency on those. Um, the staff is like still very memey. You just like you use the unused in 30 seconds and you abuse offhand weapons to swap to a dual wield setup. Um, and so that one's really way less necessary as like it's way less of an upgrade than like Vein Ripper is. Vein Ripper is in Sanctum tier, they were like one Vein Ripper was like 3.5 or 4% DPS.
mhm.
Um, so it's uh, I think for items that are relatively easy to just acquire, you just run the raid and you get a drop and you run it on every difficulty and you upgrade it. But then, like in contrast, Painsmith is still hard for pugs, so you're way less likely to get in a successful heroic Painsmith pug if your guild is not doing heroic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and similar with like the Guardian trinkets.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, that's like I think that's the same philosophy like I would use too is like in terms of items that you'd want to pick up. It's gonna be those difficult ones. Or the ones that have a lot of competition, like the ones like particularly
Like
like
Vein Ripper.
trinkets that a Vein Ripper, right? From a DPS perspective, it's still really good and like trinkets for healers that also DPS would want.
Yeah.
So
Like your raid needs twice as many Vein Rippers as most other weapons because everybody that uses it dual wields. So your Demon Hunter wants two, your monks want two, your enhancement shaman, I think they can use them, will want two. Like everybody that can use them is going to want two of them. Except for rogues, because rogues will be using Sylvanas daggers instead.
right. Right. Um but yeah, that's I mean that's what we know about season 4. Like the expectation is Blizzard has to put right. They have to put a post out this week. Like that would be the idea. But
With our luck, they're going to do it right after we end this podcast.
it's true. That's true. I'm glad we did it on a Monday. Um, well, cool. So, I mean, that's really all that happened this week. It was like the Raider.io thing wrapping up the season 4 trickle of info. Like they did release the faded schedule. Nothing really beyond that, and everything we have is from PTR. PTR hasn't been updated in like 3 weeks. So,
There
to
was
be fair,
actually a
there.
PTR build this week, but
Oh,
not
was there?
really meaningful new info.
Gotcha.
There's some like data mine stuff about what the current HP numbers are and damage numbers are, but it's all just a guess and it may well change before it hits live. Like we have no idea what to expect.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's the other thing. We don't really know how these faded raids are tuned, which will yeah, hopefully it's like I think we've talked about this a couple times, but I'd be fine if it's like heroic plus, like heroic but like slightly harder because particularly if you're doing like the mythic version of it, right? So like the mythic version would be like heroic slightly harder.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to have to like put another 4 hours into Sylvanas just
I,
to kill it.
I really wish they would like selectively nerf some of these bosses or just outright remove. Like there's a list of bosses that I would just like to never do again, right? I don't want to do Fate Scribe or Kel'Thuzad or Stone Legion Generals or Council of Blood or Lords of Dread. And like if I could just say like we're
Sure.
not doing those, we're killing the other bosses, I would be fine if it's actually tuned like regular Mythic because the other bosses actually we can probably throw Anduin on that list too. The other bosses I am like perfectly fine doing it regular Mythic scaling.
Yeah, yeah,
Because I
yeah.
think they're fun. Like I won't mind if Paintsmith is actually hard and we get to spend time doing Paintsmith because it's getting to spend time doing Paintsmith, a boss I like doing. Not, you know, getting to spend time on Lords of Dread or Fate Scribe that I actually just loathe.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, it'll be yeah. I don't know what we're gonna do, but hopefully it's sort of a chill like 3-4 hour experience to go through Mythic. Like that's what I'm hoping. So it's like one raid night, and then we can spend the rest of the time in Sepulcher because we're not definitely not adding more time for faded stuff. So
Yeah.
um,
Oh,
but yeah,
they
so
did.
that's
One more
sorry.
clarification. You cannot do the non-faded version of the raid if the raid is faded.
Oh right, they did. Yeah, they did clarify that. So
So that means that on faded sepulcher weeks, you cannot do non-faded sepulcher just for a mount farm. So if you want to just farm mounts and not do faded, you just skip every third week basically, or you actually do faded in only sepulcher.
sure. Forgot about that. Season 4 will be interesting. I hope it's just like you just get to blast and have fun. Like that's the goal.
Yeah, we're gonna see. We are because we raid on the weekend. We are not really making concrete plans for the first week of faded because we have no idea what to expect, and we're going to watch what happens on Tuesday of the patch, and if it's a steamroll, then we'll go into mythic, and if it's not a steamroll, we'll go into heroic, and like who knows, who knows.
Yeah. Who knows what's gonna happen? So well, cool. Well, I guess I mean that's all I think for this week. So we can sort of jump into the main topic, which is I mean we talked a little bit about this. I think the main focus will be on sort of some of the profession updates because this will be a sort of a group of um it's a main or sorry, it's a main thing on the group or sorry, it's a the main topic today, and it's sort of a grouping of what we did this week and some of the information that came out last week beforehand. But then also, I think the big first thing here is Blizzard did a really nice post on what their goals are for testing this week were in terms of like the beta, so or sorry, the alpha. So this is sort of I think a new thing that Blizzard's trying here, where they're being very focused about what they're testing either each week or each 2 weeks. Right now, it's they've changed it each week. We can only assume that this week we'll get another post like this and a new alpha build, right? But
Yeah,
basically, what they ended up doing was they opened up a couple of things. They opened up the Forbidden Reach, which is the Drakthir starting zone, and they sort of removed access to the Azure Span, which was the zone from last week that was up for testing. And then along with that, they've added in new dungeons, so you can try out 2 of the new dungeons. And then sort of updated and then sorry, also then released the Shaman talent tree, and then put a bunch of sort of updates around different professions and things like that below. Um, so the idea here is, I think Blizzard's being very deliberate in terms of like um, in terms of like what they want the teams to test
yeah,
and what should be active and things like that. So very similar to I think we've talked about this. I think Morgan actually made this comment in one of the interviews where he basically said they're treating this alpha testing much like they'll treat dungeon or sorry raid testing,
right.
where
Where
like you have a boss active
yeah,
for raid testing, focus on that. Here they're saying, all right, here's the zone or here's the system we want you to test, focus on that. Um, and the big thing this week, right? 2 new dungeons is really cool, so we'll talk about those. But then also we got shaman talents, which I don't know. I mean, we're not technically I'm not a shaman expert, right? But I sort of read a bunch of stuff about what people have been saying about these talents, and people love this tree.
yeah,
Like people are absolutely like, I've heard things about like if if every class is like this, um, you know what I mean? If every class tree looks like this, it'd be great and everything like that. So, yeah, so Shaman talent tree came out. Get to play around and mess around with that if you're a Shaman main, or if you're just a Shaman enjoyer. And it seems like basically every spec of Shaman is sort of enjoying their class tree,
I
right?
I think so.
It's
This is one thing I want to highlight. The class tree is very interconnected. Very different from how the Death Knight tree is that people criticize pretty heavily. Like this is very interconnected. It's entirely possible to start up here at the rest of one and like just follow this like path down and end up over here at the elemental end without having to
mhm.
take all of the elemental stuff to get there.
Yeah, yeah, much more interconnected, and I think too much wider, like just in terms of
Yeah,
like the span of talents, right? A lot more 1 point talents, a lot more like just things like that.
like in contrast, look at how narrow these are and how like locked off this is.
Yeah,
And this is actually they went
yeah,
back in the Death Knight one, got some updates, so it's more possible like you can start over here and then cross part way over, but you can't get all the way over to the other capstone without going into Unholy or
exactly.
Blood,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. So it's I mean it's a great treat. People are really enjoying it, and so I'm hoping that like I think we talked about this at the time. Like Death Knight might have been the first class they worked on these new trees with,
Yeah,
and then like Druid was also really early, and so the ones that have come out previous to this have been really good. I mean, Priest, I guess barring Priest is not the most loved tree, we'll say.
yeah.
Um,
It has
but
been
no,
so one of the things that was interesting. The you remember the like build your own berserk that bear druids get in their
yep,
tree. We see little bits of that in the shaman tree where you have like multiple different talents that are related to stormkeeper. Like you can get stormkeeper and then other things that make your stormkeeper better. And like adding different charges and things. There's
hmm
nothing quite on the same level as build your own berserk. So I'm curious if we're gonna see more of the like customize your major CD kind of thing, or
yeah,
if that's gonna stick to being like a bear or get cut from bear too.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm definitely excited for at least to see the monk tree. That'll be a next week will be a good week when that comes out, and we'll be able to mess
Tomorrow,
around with it.
right?
So
Tuesday, it's coming out tomorrow.
no, 1 week from 1 week
It's
with
always one
season
week away.
four.
Oh, with
No,
season four.
no, Emilson. I People have tried to say that I always say 1 week,
Okay.
but I'm putting my foot down. Next week it comes out. I
I'm
said 3 weeks 2 weeks ago. I said 2 weeks last week.
I'm pretty sure you
1 week
said
this week.
I'm pretty sure you said next week last week, but I'm not sure. So You
Oh, I
you
could have.
I'll let you off the hook this time.
But no, I think in any event, the monk one. I mean, I have you got to be optimistic about it and see what's going on, see what'll come out. But no, hopefully next week we'll be able to have a little bit more discussion on the monk tree. I guess it would be 2 podcasts from now. Next podcast we'll talk about how it didn't come out this week, and then
Yeah.
the one after that we'll talk about how awesome it is. So,
Yeah.
um, so cool. So that's sort of the patch notes. I'm hoping they continue to do this. There's been just, I guess, in general, a lot of different, sort of blue posts that have come out,
Yeah.
and sort of this is in line with one interview that came out late in the cycle. So Mana Crew, who I believe is a German outfit, I want to say. I don't know for sure.
I have not watched this one
Um,
yet.
yeah. But in any event, yeah, they're a German sort of publication. They did an interview with Morgan, and basically a couple things that came out of this that I thought were interesting. Number one was the alpha testing focus, which we've talked about. But the other thing too is that they started to do, or they want to do these larger sort of blog style posts or blue style posts, particularly to get feedback on things without you actually having alpha, which is a good thing. I think it's good in 2 ways. Number one, it does provide feedback from people who don't have alpha to sort of comment and say, "Hey, this looks cool. This doesn't look cool." But I think too, it gets into like potentially why Blizzard is doing certain things. So even if you have alpha, you can sort of get a context of what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we'll continue to see these more like preview blogs, right?
Yeah.
For other content as it comes out, which is always good. I mean, it seems like Blizzard has upped the communication across the board, like in terms of like I think it's what hunters have had at last count 7 or 8 blue posts
Yeah,
since their talents came out.
that's
So
more blue posts that a single like class has received than any individual class received, except for maybe druids in the entirety of the Shadowlands beta.
yeah, yeah. So the new and to be fair, the people writing these, from my understanding, are they're not new to the team, but they're like not the same main class designers from Shadowlands. So it's nice to see we're seeing like just a little bit more communication. Even if it's not exactly what you want, it's just nice to get an idea of why they're thinking this way. And the other thing to come out of this interview that I thought was also very interesting was just around that Morgan sort of has this idea, or they're sort of as a design team or as a team, they're looking at the idea of like reimagining certain things that have generally been set in stone, but sort of reimagine them and building them as more of like foundational systems that can be expanded upon, which is why the profession revamp is so big.
Yeah.
Which is why I think talent trees will, be something that's here to say. Basically, being a system that isn't just a Dragonflight system; it's a Dragonflight today, and will expand or change or mold as the next expansion comes. We're
Yeah.
not going to completely throw it away.
I think
Um,
the willingness to do a level squish is actually really big for this kind of stuff where like we already have like expansion scoped professions where like if you go and you learn alchemy you have to learn Shadowlands alchemy and BFA alchemy and Legion alchemy. They're different alchemy skills, so those are already like per expansion. But then for leveling we had just kept going up and up and up in levels, and that makes it really hard to do things with like this kind of talent tree. But since they're
yep.
willing to do level squishes, now they can be like, okay, we hit level 90. This is getting, kind of unwieldy. We're going to do a level squish. So next expansion, you all start at 50. Talent tree's getting compressed. Cut out some of the cruft, and then you level to 60 again.
Yeah.
And like, that's something that would happen like 6 years from now, right? That's 2 or 3 expansions away still, even after Dragon. And
Right.
so it's not like an everyday thing, but it does mean that they don't have to concern themselves with, well, what do we do when we have 120 levels with a style of talent tree like this?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, so I mean it's good that they're looking at that more again in the context of how they design things, like more, hey, here's a system we know will be around for a while, so let's like just iterate on it, right?
Yeah,
Um and then I guess maybe the only other thing for me that was interesting coming out of this is that there is this idea of like if you care about the lore and story, like there was in the the last patch like a little bit of storyline that was hidden, right? So there was a couple
yeah,
of encrypted quests and encrypted cutscenes that were in the build that people didn't know until they were live, which particularly around like Khalil. Is that how you say her name?
Kalia. Yeah.
Kalia, sorry, Menethil, and stuff like that. And he said they're gonna try and do more of that. So encrypted cutscenes aren't anything new. We've seen those for a while, right?
Yeah.
But encrypted quests are new.
Yeah.
And that's sort of a cool idea of like locking certain content down, testing around it, but locking certain content down, particularly when it comes to story. That again, I think is cool
I
little
think that's
flavor stuff
cool,
like that. So
actually.
yeah,
Yeah. Like, it always like I don't feel bad about like getting story spoilers from PTR. I don't. But it
yeah.
is kind of cool the collective oh my god moment when something happens on live. Like you remember um after killing Kill Jaden the first time in Legion, the sky changing.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
That was such a
Yeah,
cool thing that didn't happen on PTR. And
yeah,
so when you killed that boss and you went outside and you went, oh holy shit,
yeah,
it's different. That
yeah,
was very cool.
yeah. They have those moments are fun for sure. So, um, but yeah, it was a fairly short interview. It looked like, but not too much new in the way of info, but a couple of points from Morgan and the team there. So, um, it's cool. And one thing, actually, one final thing that isn't particular to professions before you jump in that I want to talk about, which I thought I put in the notes, but I didn't. But there is so the
You
Tuskarr
you
are
actually did.
back.
I moved it
I
off.
did put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to talk about it real quick because I think it's actually a cool flavor thing. And so this is the reason I want to talk about it, is that so um if you don't know, the Tuskarr are like the walrus race of Azeroth, very big in Wrath of the Lich King, and they sort of have dotted the world since then, right? And one of the things that they do, or one of the things in the original Wrath is they had this sort of turtle boat, and you could jump on the turtle and take you from different Tuskarr port to Tuskarr port. One thing they're adding in Dragonflight is the ability to actually ride this thing from the different Tuskarr locations around the world now. Before it was just centered on Northrend, and now you can sort of take it from different areas in like Grizzly Hill, or I guess Grizzly Hills is in Northrend, but like to Drustvar or Azuna or Vashir or like different continents across different expansions and things like that. Kunlai Summit in MOP. Um, and this, you basically can ride this boat. It just takes you all over the place. Doesn't seem like it does anything other than just like take you on a trip for an hour.
Right.
But it's like cool little flavor stuff where like, in today's modern WoW game, like there is so much between like porting place to place, or like Hearthstone, you have like 12 different ways to like port somewhere
Right.
immediately, and like you set multiple Hearthstones. It's like nice that they're adding this type of stuff, which hopefully, I mean, you've heard this a little bit from some of the other interviews, some of the nuance in it is that they're sort of adding like just like flavor stuff, not stuff that's like particularly for content or particularly that they're going to use in the future, but just like if you stumble upon this cool area, you found a cool area, and that's like the extent of it. And
Yeah.
I think like stuff like this is what, maybe not for me, because like to be fair, I'm gonna mainline and do the most efficient thing I can to like both level and play the game.
Yeah.
But like I appreciate stuff like this, like taking the time to be like, it would be cool if you could just jump on a boat, and like maybe I do this one day. Maybe I'm like, hey, I do want to take a hour-long boat ride around the world on this
Yeah.
like little turtle boat and
I mean,
chill. So
this would never fly in retail. But I one of the things that I do like about classic is having to like travel in a way that makes sense in the world, not just taking portals everywhere. Like
yeah.
you want to go to Molten Core from Orgrimmar, get on a Zeppelin, then you take a flight path and you walk.
Yeah.
And even in Burning Crusade and Wrath, this work was still the same for the most part. Like you used systems that made sense in the world, and then uh I mean in TBC and Wrath you had your own flying, so you maybe didn't take a flight path, and you definitely did not walk, but
Yeah.
you still did things that made sense, as opposed to like a lot of going there now is like going to Zareth Mortis involves taking multiple portals uh and then flying, or
Yeah.
in the case of like a bunch of raiders, getting summoned.
Yeah, just waiting for someone to summon you, yeah.
But
Yeah, no, yeah, so, I mean, for me, I think that's some of the cool flavor stuff that I think hopefully they'll continue doing it because I mean, I think that's sort of the part of the game that gets lost a lot of times, like that sort of casual nature of just like, hey, it's not all about like pushing. And I fall into this too, like just as a player nowadays. But it's not all about like pushing. Hey, I got to kill all these
Yeah,
mythic bosses. Got to push my score. Like that's all I do. It's cool that there's just like an actual world, like a game behind it that you can just sort of like hang out in. So
yeah,
yeah. So cool. So sorry, I just only thing I want to say about that before we get into the profession stuff. Um, so yeah, so Blizzard, I guess in terms of professions, Blizzard sort of they put out their big blog post about sort of just the massive amount of changes that they're doing within the professions for Dragonflight. And so it's a bunch of new things. We talked about like the work order system, which is coming in where you can like get BOP items made for you through the auction house, right? But in general, the way that you're like also leveling up these professions is different. There's like now like there's a quality to everything. There is a like reagents you can add to make things better. You can specialize. There'll be like profession talent points and things like that. And so like Blizzard has sort of put out another blog post, sort of expanding on that, sort of adding, I think, a little bit more in terms of like what is out there. And I think the cool thing about professions out of all of this, right? Not the actual systems, but like some of the stuff they're putting in the world. Again, putting in the world around this stuff, right?
yeah,
Like at the top of the post, they go through like to actually do your profession. Now you'll need to go to a station,
yeah.
and the stations have like models, and they're in certain parts of town, and like you can't make potions without being at that station, or maybe you can, but they're like of lesser like impact and
Right.
things
It's
like
like
that.
a.
So
I think they did comment that they want to still allow you to make flasks and stuff on the fly, but it would be like the using the crafting station would still be like a, I don't know, a really big skill boost. So then
mhm.
it's like you're
Yeah,
really incentivized to go back to the station when you can. But if you're in the middle of a raid night, you don't have to go back to town if you just need like an extra flask.
gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, so that's like a cool like in-world update in terms of like yeah, like I'm gonna hang out like with my little like alchemy table and mix potions and stuff like that. Um and so yeah, a couple other things. So that's sort of I think the big not the big, but they sort of showed off some of the models, some of the animations around those. They've also added in reagent bags, an update to the reagent bag. So you now have that was what the extra bag slot was, I
Yep.
think, from the alpha screenshots.
We had the
Um,
sixth bag slot in all the screenshots that got leaked, and this
yeah,
is what it's for.
yeah. So that'll be for reagents. They'll hold any reagent you can. So basically, it's just like your reagent bank, but now on your character.
Yep.
So it'll hold everything. And along with that, they've upped the stack size for a lot of things, like pretty
Yeah.
massively actually. So the current plan is gathered resources go to 1,000 a stack, which is absolutely ginormous, right?
Yeah.
And then consumable items, they say most consumable items. So a lot of consumable items will go to 200 a stack from 20. So think
Yeah.
like potions, pots, flasks, stuff like that. Now go to 20. Same with like armor kits. I don't, maybe they stack over 20 now. I don't know.
They don't.
Um,
They're stacks of 20. I know because there's time
gotcha.
to time I've been like, okay, I need to make, 200 armor kits for the guild, and that's 10 stacks.
Gotcha.
Um,
Gotcha.
it is. So, one thing that this loses is the little mini game of managing your inventory that you get in, like, when you're leveling in Classic. You don't have the nice 30 slot bags that everybody levels with now because they're
Yeah.
cheap. Um, you have this little mini game of like, you're out adventuring and you've got more gray items and like figuring out which gray items to pick up and which ones to leave behind. Um, but I don't think the retail game really has that anymore. Like,
Yeah.
you don't you if you run out of bag space, maybe you throw out a junk item, or more realistically, you throw out one of the 57 anima items you've got in your bags. Um,
Hmm.
you just end up like, we have bags that are so big that you virtually never run into this unless you are actually trying to go out and gather or do a lot of crafting. And there, you don't really make a decision. It just adds busy work of like going back and forth to the bank.
Right. Yeah.
So I think this is gonna be good, and it's just kind of an acknowledgement of how the game is different from how it was back in Classic. Like, and I mean, the other thing here is that this doesn't really impact, in theory, the mini game, the inventory mini game while you're leveling, because you're not going to be getting thousands and thousands of each herb while you're leveling, or thousands and thousands of potions while you're leveling. You're going to be
No.
doing
No.
those
No.
things at max level. The little gray items and other stuff like that are still going to take out a huge amount of backspace that you're going to have to fill around with. So maybe it's not actually going to remove anything, but that's kind of like the initial thought in my head is like, A, this is super convenient. B,
Yeah.
that kind of removes another element of the like classic leveling game systems.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, and it is definitely a very nice to have, we'll say, in terms of what it is. So, um, the other thing as a part of this update too, or this blog post from Blizzard was, they introduced basically mining equipment, or sorry, not mining equipment, but profession equipment. So the idea here too is that like there are going to be certain items I think you can equip that will give you bonuses
Yep.
to your to whatever profession you are working on. And that is super cool because they look really awesome. Like I think Blizzard, I think most people would agree, like Blizzard's art department, hands down, like the pinnacle. Like the reason the game is generally so strong is because it looks so good.
Yeah.
And so I think yeah, they've sort of I'm super excited. Like I think I'm just excited about this just to like look interesting or different, right? Like the mining stuff looks super cool. You get like a pickaxe and like a hat that has like a candle with like dripping wax over it and like a just have like a box on your back, like your little mining stuff in it. So but yeah, I'll be more interested to see like how the equipment, like how you interact with the equipment as a part of the gameplay loop. Like,
Yeah.
do you have to keep it equipped to get the bonuses? Do you just have to have it
So
in your
it's a
bags?
separate set of equipment slots from what I saw.
Okay,
So
good,
you
good.
don't have to swap it back and forth. You don't have to like swap, especially if you're playing in war mode, right? Like imagine trying to gather
Yeah,
in war mode and you like swap to your gathering gear and someone just absolutely murders you
yeah.
because you have no combat stats.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's just basically it's like separate gear slots
From
on
what
like
I've
your
seen,
character
yeah,
sheet.
yeah.
Okay.
It's not on your character sheet right now. It's on a separate like crafting panel. Um,
Okay.
but it is separate. You get new slots for it. Um, that is how I believe it works. I have, as I said, not spent as much time on alpha as I wanted, so I have not actually messed with the crafting stuff yet. I want to get
Gotcha.
on and mess with the new cooking and alchemy stuff. Um, one other quality of life thing I want to mention as well, they are finally fixing prospecting and milling. These
Oh yeah.
these are the biggest pain in the ass on live. They in I think in BFA they started, or no, in Legion they started adding the like mass milling, so you can like mass mill fell fell wheat or whatever it is, and um, but those require that you have exactly 20 to the mass
Right.
mill, and you still got to sit there. If you've got 4,000 herbs because you just bought a bunch off the auction house to make inks, you have to sit there, like mass milling for 30 minutes. So
God.
they've
Yeah.
they've streamlined that. There's a new system for it to like basically there's going to be a recipe in each of your professions, like your Legion jewel crafting, your BFA jewel crafting, your Shadowlands jewel crafting are all going to have like a prospecting uh recipe that you can use, that you're going to be able to just hit like use all on
Oh
whatever
nice.
or you put in. So it's like your ore becomes like an optional reagent. Why do you have to put one in, and you just hit create all and it just mills it all or prospects it all.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, that's a huge call. I forgot about that. I mean, to be fair, like my professions have been the same. Generally, the ones I pick are the same every expansion. It's always alchemy and enchanting.
Yeah.
Because like I want extra flash duration and I don't want to have to find enchanting mats because I EE so much gear anyway. It's like it's an
Yeah.
easy way to make gold just by playing the game for me. So um
Yeah.
maybe I'll pick up something else this expansion. But that's a huge quality of life thing. It seems like
Yeah.
a lot of quality of life stuff coming into the profession space, which is I think sorely needed. Like you said, they've essentially had the same profession system in place for like
Yeah.
3 or 4 expansions, like with the zero change. So
Yeah.
um so cool. So I think next up, so they did the sort of the blog post. You can definitely check out some of the stuff, but there was a couple of posts, particularly around alchemy, which I wanted to focus on because I think this is going to be some of the bigger change. Like again, I think it's all bigger changes, but one of the more I think shocking changes or drastic changes in terms of like um, the going into the expansion. So the biggest thing coming into alchemy this expansion is what is called Phials. And I think we talked about this briefly in like the original previews. And I was like, oh, you'll have flasks and Phials, but like you'll just use the flask. They'll never be able to balance these Phials too well, and it'll be kind of annoying. Well,
There are no
it looks like
flasks.
there are no flasks. There's just Phials, and so basically, what Phials are is they function like the old flask did. Key differences: they're shorter duration, um, less mats, of course. But then also they aren't just stat increases. They aren't like you get X number more int or Y number more whatever. There's some interesting effects. And so I mean more power to them to kind of create these like unique files and these unique things that'll last through death and things you can use over the course of say a dungeon or a raid. But yeah, I don't know how I don't know. Flasks are just so easy. These are sort of not gonna think. I mean, maybe need to make like a different one than the ones I have. So I'll need to keep a handful on time. I don't know. It's kind of slightly annoying, but yeah, I get why they may have wanted to shake up at least the alchemy profession and like get away from the idea of like the fun things are the potions you get and that's it, and then everything else is just a flask that you always use, right? That's a straight stat increase. So I don't know if you took a look through all these elements. I don't know if there's one that
Yeah.
sort of stands out.
I mean, there's still file of charged isolation. This is the sliver equivalent. That is still going to be awful if it ends up being the best for casters. But there is
Yeah.
one file of static empowerment that encourages you to remain stationary that will and gives you a movement speed buff when you do have to move. Um, which will likely be actually better in practice because like if you imagine you're a priest, a lot of the time you want to stand still, then you gotta do a big move for a mechanic. Well, getting a huge amount of speed rating from that, you're not casting while you're doing that anyway, so getting a bunch of speed to actually make the move will be very nice. um for tanks, there's one file of the Eye in the Storm. Your primary stat is increased for each enemy that is attacking you, stacking up to 5 times. That's just an obvious choice, seems like, for a dungeon environment or any fight where you're tanking a bunch of ads. They do have to be attacking you, so that means you have threat on them, which means that this is not a DPS file. They just are going to get 0 value from this, unless attacking you means something completely different in their minds.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, there's a few different ones in here that like I'm gonna be interested in which of these end up actually making it live, because there's a couple in here like Iced Phial of Corrupting Rage. You gain Corrupting Rage, which grants critical strike rating. After suffering 100% of your health and damage, you briefly swap to Overwhelming Rage, which causes you to take 100% of your health as nature damage over 30 seconds. If you like a single person, this seems fine. 30 seconds is a long time, so there's plenty
Yep.
of time to heal through this. It's not that bad. Uh,
Mhm.
But imagine your entire melee group using this, or just like 6, 7, 8 DPS using this. Suddenly, you're having to heal 8 players for their entire health bar over 30 seconds, on top of the just the damage that is already going out from a fight.
Yeah.
That seems like it's another one that's just going to be bait. Like it feels like there's going to just be like everybody using charged or static empowerment, uh or maybe elemental chaos ends up being tuned well, and like the tanks use Eye of the Storm, uh
That's true. Yeah.
something like that. Is But it feels like some of these other ones are just going to be like, it's going to be like corruption, like people going too high on corruption. Like in theory, maybe charged isolation or corrupting rage is better for you, but in practice we're going to say no, you're not allowed to use that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, it'll be interesting to see which ones sort of come out as the ones that are the best. But it's cool that Blizzard's sort of doing this sort of weird stuff in terms of like these type of potions, right? Or sorry, files. So like changing up the flask sort of, I guess, construct or like system, which has been in place since, I mean, original World of Warcraft, right? Like classic launch with flasks that no one ever used because they were ridiculously expensive and like weren't that big of an increase. But yeah. Um, but yeah, and then I guess also keeping with the alchemy theme is we did data mine, or there was data mining on all of, or a bunch of new potions in Dragonflight. Which sort of, again, this idea of like these aren't the typical like invis pot, mana pots, health pots, assuming those are all there, right?
Yeah.
These ones are like different, like different like healing ones. Like there's one that reduces mana cost by 100%, but increases your cast time. So like you get, 100% mana reduction over the course of this potion, and then you just cast a little bit longer. Which, you weigh the cost of that versus the cost of maybe a drink potion. A potion where you'll get mana over a course of a certain amount of time. Um, so yeah, there's like interesting new ones like that. And so
There's
and
a
cool that
few
Blizzard's again. Sorry.
there's a few of these that are we've seen some previously, I think. Like residual neural channeling agents, while dead, assault your enemy's consciousness with what remains of your own, dealing nature damage over 18 seconds to your target. Should you be revived, the remaining damage will be dealt instantly. Releasing your spirit will return consciousness to you and cancel the effect. So
Oh.
that's kind of neat. Is like imagine getting to 1% on the boss and like everybody that's dead is like you know using these potions to try and help kill it, and it's not that much additional damage, right? But it is something. And if there's 18 people dead and your two tanks are trying to solo and win, maybe that's enough.
Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah, definitely we've definitely had some very, very close wipes, like sub 100K wipes, right? To bosses. So
Yeah.
um
There's also, so because of the way that Phials are replacing flasks, cauldrons are also changing to give potions instead of um Phials. Like the Phials are going to be something you have to provide for yourself. Cauldrons will instead provide potions. Um
yeah.
and so these are just stat potions. So just stat.
Prolonged power's back.
Like it's, yeah, it's your main stat for 45 seconds from the max level one.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's just prolonged power. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Which is funny that I had that. What prolonged powers were? Was that BFA
That was
or was
Shadow. Oh,
that
that was Legion.
Legion?
You
Yeah.
would, well, some people, I know some people that use them in BFA still because they were just so cheap,
I
and the BFA ones were really expensive.
Yeah, I use them leveling up through BFA. So
Yeah,
um
I mean, I know people
yeah.
that like in a heroic raid, like after were in Mythic Prog, right? Instead of using BFA potions, would use prolonged power potions
Oh
because
really?
the prolonged power ones were still basically free, and the
Sure.
BFA ones were very expensive still. So they were like, I can use this and get something, and it's not even that much worse. Like prolonged powers are actually really good.
Yeah.
BFA potions were not as much.
Yeah. Yeah. Um but yeah, so I mean, tons of cool stuff from like the alchemy profession came out. Just interesting new profession changes in general. So, um, like I said, I'm always down for Blizzard changing it up a little bit, and this should be cool. Should be cool to see how they end up. I don't know if I'm bored with files yet because it means I have to make them myself. It sounds like I can't just click a cauldron, so might be an issue. But potion cauldrons are nice. So
All I'm saying is that they better not make the ones that are like toxic in raid the ones that are also the best sim.
yeah,
Like
no, that is true.
if every one of our DPS wants to put corrupting rage on and we have to say no to all of our DPS, or even worse, say no to like most of our DPS, but demon hunters are allowed because they're fucking invulnerable anyway. Um like not gonna be happy about that.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Yeah, I also hope the good ones are not the troll ones because that would be annoying for sure, for certain. So,
We
all
also
right, I guess we
got
can.
oh, we
Oh,
got
sorry.
a little bit of information, additional information about how recrafting items is gonna
Oh
work.
yes.
And so we mentioned this last time, I believe. So when we got the previous preview, that you're going to be able to recraft items, but we didn't have any details. We have some now. So you need this soulbound reagent called Artisan's Metal. Either the crafter or the person getting it crafted can provide it using the work order system. And what this lets you do is change out any of the optional reagents in the gear. So the ones that are already there, like gems, they get destroyed. But the new ones, you can like this is how you could bump up the item level on an item, or you could swap out secondary stats or add a bonus effect. Like all these different things that come from optional reagents are going to be possible using this to recraft the item. So this means that there's a very low barrier to like getting a inexpensive item for your alt and then later on going and upgrading it using your own artisan's metal that you just picked up while you were, doing quests or dungeons or wherever these drop from.
Yep.
So this I think actually solves a lot of my concerns about the like what would happen with low ranked recipes. Like early on, especially in the tier, you're gonna get a low ranked recipe just because you can. Like it's gonna be cheaper,
Right.
and you get it recrafted later once prices have gone down or once you've got your soulbound mats to make it easier. Whatever ends up happening with that. Like if recrafting is so frictionless, then there's gonna be a market for every level of item, pretty much.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So if you can pull the stuff out and add different reagents, it'll be perfect. So I forgot about that. I sort of glossed over that when I was doing my review. So
Yeah, this
nice.
also solves one of the things that people run into somewhere where like your secondary priorities would shift around. You want to switch like your
Yeah.
legendary from haste mastery to mastery crit, and but
Right.
well, this will let
Exactly.
you do that
Exactly.
without paying the full cost of getting a whole new legendary made.
Nice. Very, very cool. Very cool. Um, awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, any other like profession related updates you had from your side?
I really want to get on alpha. Maybe I'll do that this evening. I'll get on alpha and play around with cook.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
I had been the main cook for my raid team for this
Hmm.
entire expansion up until the stone soup cauldrons came out because they're actually cheaper to just buy than to make. People
Oh,
make them
really?
to level up cooking or something, and
Oh, gotcha.
so they're like, or it's maybe not cheaper. It's like the vendor items like 250 gold, and you have to combine that with some other stuff to make the actual cauldron.
Hmm.
But they're only like 260 or 270 gold on the auction house. So
Just gobbling them up.
I
Yeah.
just buy them. Like they're
That's
not
so
that
awesome.
much. Like I'm okay paying effectively like 10 gold over, 20 gold over what it would cost me to just craft it myself. So I might hop on and play around with cooking and see what that's like.
Oh, that'd be fun. That'd be a good time. Be a good time.
But
Um,
the
I can't hop
other
on alpha yet, unfortunately.
yeah, yeah. Soon, I believe.
Exactly. 1 week.
Uh-huh. When the monk like they gotta let you in so you can test the mystery for talents, right?
Exactly.
You and
Exactly.
not
It's like
Abe.
hand in hand. Well, I mean, Abe's got a free pass, so it's
True.
alpha.
He's one of the people I did dungeons with.
Oh, nice, nice, nice.
Speaking of dungeons, we did get
Yeah.
two
Segue.
new dungeons on the alpha this week. So we got
Love dungeons.
Neltharus, which is like Black Dragonflight themed. Neltharus, Neltharion, Black Dragon, like that became Deathwing, that kind of thing. And we got Uldaman, Legacy of Tyr, which is like a revamp of Uldaman, the dungeon from Classic. Um, and having done them both, I can say that if you try these on Alpha right now, Uldaman is a lot harder.
Oh, really?
Just on a pure numbers level, the Uldaman is a lot harder.
Interesting. I wonder if it's a what if it's a higher level dungeon in terms of where it sits in like the hierarchy, and that's why.
Maybe.
Like maybe it's like a later
That
zone
could
one.
be. But it wasn't like it wasn't like that bad. I was still doing pulls of multiple packs at the time, pretty routinely. Um,
Gotcha.
but it was definitely noticeably harder than Neltharus.
Gotcha.
Um,
How? Oh, sorry.
the other thing that I want to mention before we move on to the other stuff, there are fervent strikes in these dungeons, which seems like a copy paste error. Like they copied a spell that had a fervent strike from
Yeah.
before that got patched out of live and left it in there. So that's something they got to fix because they removed those from retail from like live for good reason. And
Yeah.
it would really suck if the first tier of dungeons next season we have to deal with it again.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Or this just isn't a part of the first tier of dungeons since there's only going to be like what 4
Yeah.
dungeons in the Mythic Plus. So cool. I mean, I guess so. Uldaman was much harder. How was the like how would you describe the dungeon like in terms of like is it like super linear? Is it sort of wide open? Like are
Very
there
all right. So Neltharus seemed very open. Um,
okay.
so the way that that dungeon is set up, you like go in, you do a first boss, and there's like two wings that you go off and do, and then you kind of go back to the center and you do the final boss. Um,
Okay. Hmm.
and so that one seemed very open. There's a lot of options there of doing bosses in different orders, kind of like in the other side right now. You can do the bosses in a bunch of different orders. Um,
Hmm.
there was a lot of travel time. After we finished one wing, there wasn't a quick way to get over to the other. We had to like backtrack all the way back. As far as we could tell, like we didn't see a way to get back there more quickly.
No, like there's not like the Mechagon thing you click and it like ports you.
Not that we saw. Maybe it's
Yeah.
not implemented. Maybe we just didn't see it. It needs to be more visible. Or maybe
Okay.
it's actually that we weren't supposed to go the way that we did, and we were supposed to go the other way.
That's true. It is alpha. It is alpha.
Um, who knows? But it that's one thing that we did notice. Um, and I mean, not a lot to say about the bosses. There's some interesting stuff there, even for a normal dungeon. Like one of the bosses, um, like chains players to the ground, like, and not like on Prototype Pantheon, right, where you get speared and you're just stuck there. You have
Yeah.
a pillar of fire with a spear in it, and you are chained to
Jeez.
that spear, and you can move around. Um,
Okay.
and you have to like move the chain through the boss, which stuns the boss and makes him take increased damage.
Gotcha.
But it's a little bit more challenging than that because if you move through a player, they get stunned and take damage.
Ah, okay. So you can't just like run directly. You gotta watch for the other.
Yes.
Okay.
So the other
Okay.
players have to all pay attention. So it gets kind of hectic. We didn't realize that at first, so we ended up with like three chains out. Um, and that was quite difficult. And then we also had a situation where someone stood on me, the tank, with their chain.
Oh, geez. That was fun.
Like the chain was over top of me, and I'm just like perma stunned on the ground. Cannot move, cannot parry, cannot dodge, like
Oh, geez.
nothing. I was playing a Death Knight because they have new talents, and
Yeah.
Death Strike. Turns out
That's
Death
crazy.
Knight not great when you cannot Death Strike.
No, it's yeah, it's a pretty core ability to the old blood
So
spec.
that one I think was like the highlight for me. The
Mhm.
bosses were all fairly short because it was just normal difficulty. Um,
Gotcha.
but yeah, it was there were some pretty neat abilities in there.
Oh, cool.
Um, Uldaman, like the vibe of Uldaman, like if you've done the OG Uldaman dungeon, it is like a dig site. It is, you know, constructs and trogs and all of the stuff you would expect from Uldaman, the dungeon. Um, there's a
Gotcha.
there's a reference to the Lost Vikings game that is one of like Blizzard's very early games.
Yeah.
Where literally the first boss, actually, so you have the option to, there's two different bosses you can do first, but in practice you're always doing this one first, because if you don't, you have to go kill the second one and then backtrack to here and then go back forward. So like,
Gotcha.
why would you
Okay.
ever do that? Because you have to do this one and the other one both to unlock a door. So
Mm-hmm.
why do it in the other one? Anyway, so it's the Lost Dwarves. There's 3 of them. I honestly
Oh
couldn't tell you
yeah.
what they do, except that partway through the fight, they get in like a flying longship and like just fly and drop bombs on you. And your ranged DPS are very happy because they get to beat the melee DPS because the melee DPS can't hit it,
Oh really?
but the ranged DPS can.
That's got to be an oversight, right?
I have no idea.
That's weird. They
Um,
do that.
but yeah, there's and this dungeon actually culminates in fighting a member of the Infinite Dragonflight, which is the first Infinite Dragonflight boss we have had since
Isn't
maybe
Captain? Isn't
Mop.
wait? Serious? Isn't Captain Skyhook from the Infinite Black
Uh
Dragonflight?
I guess
Like, wouldn't he count?
technically, yeah, that probably counts.
But you're
Yeah, that
thinking of
probably counts.
Mizorno,
Like
right?
Murozond,
Or
remember
Murazan? Yeah, yeah. I can't
in
remember. Yeah.
like I guess technically Skyhook does have a time themed ability where they've got the time warp ability that they use.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I was thinking Murozond. Murozond is the last like really noteworthy Infinite Dragonflight boss that I can remember.
Yeah.
And this is more similar to Murozond than
Okay.
to Skyhook. So this one actually was pretty neat as well. You end up with a bunch of puddles of sand on the floor that
Mm-hmm.
obviously you don't want to stand in. They do damage. But then you enter like this time warp phase where those puddles give you an insane amount of haste. Like if you've
Okay.
done Plaguefall with the red slimes,
Yep.
killing those
Mm-hmm.
and like standing in them for a boss, it's like that.
Oh wow,
And that's the
that's
fight
fun.
mechanic. And
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
so that's going to be very cool. A little bit of a feels bad for a spec like Windwalker that currently does not scale with haste very well because
Mm-hmm.
they're just not going to be as good on that boss. So this may not be a Windwalker dungeon between the Lost Dwarves and the boss at the end. Um, but I mean, for fortified dungeons especially, it's going to be way more determined by trash.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and it's really really difficult to say much about trash from a normal dungeon. It just dies
yeah.
too fast. It really does. Um, so especially like, well, we did run into a number of technical issues, but they weren't related to the dungeon per se. Like we had a player whose talents were turned off, and
Mm-hmm.
they were in survival, but they didn't have any survival talents. None of their survival stuff worked, so they switched to Beast Mastery, which had been working, and then none of their BM stuff worked, and all of their talents were disabled. So they went out and they respect, and they tried to do it again, and they came back in the dungeon, and none of their stuff worked. So we did it. They ended up having to like totally log out and then log back in, and then their BM talents started working.
Gotcha.
And so we did like half of Neltharus with a hunter that had no talent.
Okay, that's funny. Yeah. Well, I guess my yeah. I mean, it sounds like though, like I guess is Uldaman. I mean, original Uldaman was very like it was very labyrinth like. There was lots of different pathways you
Yeah,
could go, but it was fairly narrow in terms of like
this
you
Uldaman
didn't
is
have big open
very
space.
very linear.
Very linear. Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
I
Like,
did
is
not
it?
see a way to actually do the bosses in any order other than swapping the first two. Like I said, you could
Yeah, yeah.
do Bromac, which is the second boss before Lost Dwarves, but if you do that, you have to backtrack and kill the Lost Dwarves and then come back out. So
Gotcha.
there's a concept in Dungeons and Dragons map design when you're making a map for your dungeon of like whether the branches in the paths actually matter. Like if you've got a bunch of branches in the paths but none of them actually matter or actually
Yeah.
go anywhere different, then it's not really a branching dungeon. It's
Right.
not really a dungeon with flexibility. And Uldaman has some stuff like that where like Lost Dwarves are off on their own little branch, but you don't actually get any choice from them being in a different branch. Like you can't miss them because you
Right.
cannot progress without killing them. So you have to
Right.
just turn around and go back and kill them if you do miss them. Um, and you also can't like skip the second boss because the door doesn't unlock. Like you have to have the Lost
Make
Dwarves
it to the
unlock the
door.
door, and the Lost Dwarves will not unlock the door until Bromac is dead.
Gotcha. And they won't.
So
Wow. And even if Romaki is dead, they're not gonna unlock it because you to
if you
like
don't go and do
convince them.
their encounter first, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and like
But it. But I mean, I guess what you're saying, it sounds like there are some. It's not like when I think of linear dungeons, I think of what was the dungeon behind a Taldazar in
King's Rest,
BFA King's
where
Rest. I
it's
think of King's Rest as like
yeah,
the quintessential. This is a linear dungeon,
it's a
as
little
there's only
bit
one path.
more open than that in the sense that like you have corridors like in King's Rest.
Hmm.
But you also have like King's Rest was very narrow pretty much the whole way through. The only areas that were more open were the boss rooms.
Right.
Uldaman has more open areas where you can like not pull the entire room,
Gotcha.
but it's paired with corridors where you effectively have to invis skip or pull what's in there. So you have to use
Gotcha.
invis pots or you uh, pull what's in there. So for like doing pugs, you're probably going to do a lot of like, unless some of the trash ends up being really insane, just pulling a lot of the stuff that's in the narrow corridors, and then
Mhm.
going around some of the stuff that's in the more open chambers.
Gotcha.
So it's not as linear as King's Rest. It's closer to like Underrot, where it's like got those corridors, but it's
Hmm.
also got some
It's
open
like
spaces.
gotcha. All right, cool. I mean, it sounds like excuse me, original Alderman is like still a pretty fun dungeon.
It's actually split into like 2 or 3 dungeons in the Dungeon Finder right now because like it's one of those old classic dungeons that was just huge. It was
Yeah.
designed for you to go and spend all afternoon exploring it.
Yeah.
And this is not like that. It is definitely not a mega dungeon,
Gotcha.
which is what we
Gotcha.
call those now.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Um. Well, I know we're quickly running out of time. Only about 10 more minutes left. I did want to cover one more thing after dungeons, and that was just Blizzard did put out a little bit of a post on some of the feedback they've gotten from evokers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think that we kind of talked about was the empowered spells and like how those will work. So I think you had given the feedback that like currently the way empowered spells works on Invoker is like it's a little clunky, but there's a GCD when you start the empowered cast, and then when it ends, there's also another GCD, so you're gonna just cast something right after that, right? But there's also a weird thing in the middle where like if you cancel an empowered spell early, sometimes I think you were saying it doesn't actually fire off; it
Right.
just cancels, it refunds everything, and then you cast whatever you were casting. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. So they did put out a little bit of a blue post in terms of like, yep, it is intended that if you are casting an empowered spell, if you're channeling an empowered spell, and then you cast something different, everything gets refunded from the empowered spell, right? And they treat that as like it being canceled. Not that it's ending earlier, that you canceled it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and that's sort of like the way that they're going in their interpretation of it, which means like if you're empowering something, you press a different ability to cast it early. Essentially, your empower spell will cancel, refund everything, and you'll cast your new ability.
Yeah.
Which I don't know. Like that's, I mean, to be fair, they do a good job of explaining. Like they literally have to interpret what the player wants to do at that point, which is like either end early or cast the next thing.
Yeah.
And they're basically defaulting to saying like our interpretation, if you hit another spell while you're empowering it, is you want to cancel your empower and cast this new thing.
So, and part of the reason that they do that is the GCD at the end, which they mentioned.
Right.
Like, because there's a GCD at the end, you cannot manually end your empower spell and then immediately start casting something else. So if they allowed you to cancel your or like cast your empower by
Mhm.
pressing another spell, that would like let you skip the GCD there. Um I think the real issue is that there's the GCD there. It doesn't like if you remove the GCD there, then it becomes fairly obvious that like when you push another button, because like actually really right now when I push another button while I've empowered, what I probably actually did is I pushed 2 buttons in rapid succession and like missed one. I pushed my empower button again and then pushed another
Right.
button, which like, and this comes back to the press and hold mode for empower spells being very very awkward. I like do not like that at all. Um, it
Yeah.
felt very awkward for me actually like in combat. When I was at the dummy, it feels fine, but when I'm actually in combat, it just feels very awkward to try and get the right level of empowerment out. So the double press one is the one that I ended up using, and that one puts you in a situation where like if my if my empower spell's on 5, and I want to like end that and then start queuing up my next spell, I push 5 and then I push 4, but maybe I missed the 5 or didn't get it pressed down in time, and I ended up just canceling it and getting 4, and it like I don't know,
Yeah.
it feels really awkward. The other thing they could do is make the press and hold mode better. Like if that mode is better, I think this kind of goes away, because when you let go of it, you just cast it.
Right.
And I'm not typically pressing like 3 different spells at the same time. So like I think if the press and hold one actually felt good, this wouldn't be as much of an annoyance. But because the press and hold one feels really bad to me, I'm like using the double press one, and that introduces this other piece of awkwardness that also feels bad, but less bad
Gotcha.
than like constantly misfiring your empower spells because it seemed like you didn't actually start it.
Gotcha. And I think you mentioned that's the problem with press and hold, is that there seems to be like a delay in like it activating you holding the spell down, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
it just feels like, yeah, like you hit it and nothing happens, and it's enough of a delay where you're like, did I hit it right? And like you take your finger off of it,
yes.
and then
And then
like your
you
spell
cancel
goes
it,
off, or you're like,
and then not
yeah,
only do you end up with like this 1 second GCD from doing that, so you've just like
yeah,
wasted time, and you can't even start the next one yet because you're still on GCD. You can't start recasting it.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
yeah,
That
yep,
that can be, yeah. I mean, I guess if they clean up that, this becomes, like you said, less of an issue. But
yeah,
it's good that they, excuse me, that they've at least, like, again, this all goes into that thing we talked about earlier, where like there's be very on top of the communication, at least right now, right? Like I think it's this, like it's nice that they're this vocal. I'll be interested to see if we have the same feedback in like a month, like 6 weeks from now, when like basically all of the base contents in the game, all the class trees are in the game, and you've got like more people playing the alpha, even the beta cycle, and like how like consistent the communication comes back. Because I'll say like
yeah,
the blue posts are great, but I mean I've even heard of like there's been a lot of like um I won't say behind the scenes because it's not that private, but a lot of like developers in discords talking to people too, right?
yeah,
Nothing like the old secret discords like they used to have, but
yeah.
just the idea of like now developers being okay talking to the players, which yeah, which is great. I just hope us as players don't ruin it.
Hopefully
'Cause we
not.
have the yeah, we have the tendency to maybe be a little bit rude in a general group to people.
Yeah, yeah.
um But cool. I mean, I don't know if you had any other topics you wanted to cover. That was the
Not
big
really,
stuff.
unless you want
Yeah.
to hear me complain about Lords of Dread for another 15 minutes, because I could do that.
No. No. I mean, I am a little bit concerned about the lack of season 4 information, just because
Yes.
I mean, people are already asking about like, hey, what do we do with like these tokens that we're supposed to get and like Venn thing. And I actually said something incorrect. Actually, let's clarify on the podcast today that like the vendor, and I'm an idiot because I didn't look at this, but I was corrected by the main man Volk. And they said that the vendor is pre-filtered on just your spec or your class. However, if
Yes.
you take that filter off, you can
Okay.
see every trinket and every weapon, and they're not sort of redded out, or they're not like grayed out.
Right.
So it looks like potentially you may be able to buy whatever trinket or weapon from the raid that you want.
Yeah.
However, I don't, if it's not pre in that list, I would feel I'm less confident that you can buy whatever you want, right? I'm more confident to say that like
Yeah.
whatever is filtered as your class, really whatever is on the loot table from the boss is what you should be able to buy from with that currency. But
Yeah.
to be fair, on PTR right now, you can unfilter it and see all those, and it's not the red text like you couldn't buy it.
Right.
Potentially available with currency. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean we'll see. Season 4 is what, 7 days away now, and all we know is the fated raid schedule. So we'll see.
We know what the affixes do in theory. No testing.
That's true. That is actually true too. Who was asking me? I think our raid leader, we were talking about on one boss like this week, and he was like, "How do they even work? Like, is it an affix per boss? Is it an affix per week? Because there's 4 of them. So like, to be fair, it could be a different one each boss. It could be the
Yeah.
same one for the week, and they rotate.
Yeah, I
I
hadn't
have
actually thought about that. Like, what happened? Like, are we gonna be doing one affix on one boss and one affix on a different boss, and like, or is it gonna be like, oh, this is the whatever week
exact
for Castle Nathria?
yeah. I don't. Again, nobody. I don't think they've posted anything, so nobody knows. I mean, I would assume it's this. Like my assumption as we talked through this was it's the same affix for the whole week. It's not
Yeah,
different per boss, but
having
to be
it.
fair, not knowing much about the affixes, maybe an affix actually doesn't work for a boss. Meaning, like
Yeah,
what it has you do, just
yeah,
fundamentally the way the boss functions, you won't be able to do that. And at that point, then it's like, well, maybe it has to be different per boss. But
yeah,
I don't know enough either way. So
yeah, yeah. I'm a little bit disappointed that we're not gonna be able to turn it off. Like, I would like to be able to just go back and do non-faded sepulcher just for mounts. Like, our raid is planning to do um faded, but
mhm,
it would be nice for us to be able to take our alts and like do a sales run that week as well
that's true.
of
Yeah,
just like selling non-faded sepulcher.
that's true. But maybe faded sepulcher is just super easy, and you still get to
Maybe
blast
so.
through it.
Maybe so. We will
We'll
see.
see.
There are at least
We'll see.
there's a few bosses that will get harder as we get more damage, like the Kel'Thuzad kind of thing where you have to stop damage. Um, but at least most bosses get easier as you get more damage, and these affixes
Yeah.
all give damage amps. So
Yeah.
in theory,
Cutting off phases, hopefully.
it should
Yeah.
be easier. Like,
Yeah.
should be easier. We'll find out. But
We
that is going to be it for our show today. Thank you all for watching and or listening. Apologies for the delay, but real life takes precedence, so that's what happens. But if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to support it and the other work that we do over at the Peak of Serenity, you can do that over at our Patreon at patreon.com/Peak of Serenity. And of course, come and join the Discord. It's a great place to hang out. You can meet such stellar people like myself and Anam there, as well as a number of the people that we have in chat. Hi, Drez, are regulars in the different lounges. So if you go to the Mistweaver section, you will run into Mr. Dresington himself.
Okay.
But that is going to be it for the show today. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.